What's going on, YouTubers, gamers and hobbyists? Welcome to Topical Tuesday, a series where we take a topic and talk about it. Could be a question, could just be a generalized comment, and I speculate on that, give my thoughts. If it's a question, I will ask it of you guys, but I will also ask it of myself. Anyway, this week the topic I want to talk about, I've called Realism versus Recreation. So first of all, what do I mean by that? Well, in our games, in our hobbies, we have games that represent, if we're wargaming, we have elements that represent armies, the action of fighting, combat, so on and so forth. And I'll talk about any other elements later, because this is the main one I want to address. Now, some games are quite realistic. Some are super realistic. Some are not that realistic. But they're fun. The position of fun to realism varies, depends on what it is. I don't think there's a set thing. It doesn't, one doesn't have to be here to make the other one up there. It could be there. It could be there. It doesn't really matter. So what I mean by it is, some games have a certain level of realism. Some are actually based on historical real life, okay? And I'm not talking about, I'm not even going to go into how you feel about that sort of thing, because Von Ketteringham raised this question on his channel, and my friend Ralph Astley responded, and his thoughts on that subject mirror my own. So if you want to know what I think, as well as Ralph, go and check out his video. You'll see it up in the corner, so put it up there. Just click on that, head on over there and check out his video, see what he thinks about that, or go to Von Ketteringham's, I don't know if it's his latest video, but it's certainly one of his latest. I think he called it, on any factions you will not play. That's not what I'm talking about here, because someone's so eloquently put what they think about it, and it's what I feel about the subject. So I thought, well, I don't need to do that. So I want to talk about realism versus recreation. How real does a game need to be for you to get optimum enjoyment out of it? Now, as a lot of you know, in terms of wargaming, or tabletop gaming at least, my interests lie largely in sci-fi and fantasy, with a little bit of horror sometimes mixed in. Sometimes it could be a lot of horror, but I'm just talking about the main ones, my main vices for gaming. So for instance, I like Warhammer 40,000. I used to like Warhammer Fantasy. I'm not such a fan of Age of Sigmar, but that's all different topics, not to be discussed here. Do I like fantasy tabletop battle games where big armies of traditional fantasy armies battle? Yes, I love it. I think it's great. But what about the realism of the games? Now, how real do I want my game? Well, it's a very subjective matter as to how real you want your game. Now, I know for a fact that there are some war games that, in terms of realism behind how the game is played, how it is run, how the combat is run and generated, and all the attacks and the wounds and destruction and everything else. I know that there are games out there that are super realistic, to the point, I would say, probably of becoming simulations rather than games. But then again, some people enjoy that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong or good or bad about either side. I'm just saying that there are. So my question to you guys really is, how realistic say this is the realism on this side, how real does a game need to be for you to get maximum enjoyment? Does it need to be as real as it gets, no realism at all, just streamline the heck out of it, or a good midway point? Myself, I like a good midway point. The only drawback with that is, because it's a midway point, it is a kind of an open Pandora's box, if you will, and it gives a lot of grey areas about certain subjects which gamers which are this way or this way, depending on how far they are, which side of this line, which is optimum, they draw different opinions as to, you know, how real they want it to be. Like, for, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of something off the top of my head. Firing a gun, for instance, a guy in a space marine firing his gun in space. You know, do people want it to have all the chances for failure, for jamming, for all the dangers that go off when a weapon is fired in space? Now we're talking like munitions. I know, like for the role-playing game, those Dark Places, firing a gun, an ordinary gun, on a spaceship or a space station is a pretty bad idea, because there are all sorts of problems that could occur from that. You know, and it's based on real factual science, I suppose. That's not to say it's incredibly complicated. It's I will say that the game, Those Dark Places, as a role-playing game, is very, very good. Very good. And it's one I'm going to be running through at some point in the future. I myself now am setting up for a game of Dungeons and Dragons. I'm going to be preparing for my next solo D&D outing. Now, D&D itself, it's not terribly realistic. It's not completely unrealistic. It's somewhere in between the two. You know, to the point of, you know, the hit points thing. I know a lot of people have an issue with that. Whether a character has 100 hit points or 1 hit point, they can still do all the actions as normal. But that's where house rules come into play, and these other fantastic rules like advantage and disadvantage can come into play as well, particularly when they're utilising skill checks and so on. That's another topic again. But for me, I like a certain level of realism. I don't want it too real, because that takes away the crunch of the enjoyment of the game. It becomes more of a dirge for me to have to keep looking at rules, flipping through tables, and I don't enjoy that. I am probably the most narrative player you'll ever come across. I'm that guy that will say, if someone says, "Oh, I don't think that's the way it's supposed to do it," I've heard that the rule is this, and I'll just go, "Yeah, that's fine." I'm not one for let's check the rule book. I want to know for sure. I don't care about that. I just want to have fun, play the game, and you know, my enjoyment of a game, believe it or not, isn't the winning or losing. I know that sounds corny. It really does, and I'm aware of that. It's not. But on a tabletop war game, my enjoyment of the game comes from the visual aspect. What my eyes see on the tabletop, the visual representation in miniature of a skirmish or battle. That's what I enjoy. The theatre that's put before me. So in Warhammer, I absolutely love witnessing games of Warhammer, because it's such a great theatre. You know, these days everybody paints their models so well. It's just it's gorgeous to look at. And the other thing I like about my fictional universes of Warhammer is that there's so much lore and fiction written for it that it almost feels like a real historical game. Another example of this is the Lord of the Rings tabletop battle game. Playing Lord of the Rings, even role-playing Lord of the Rings, feels a little bit akin to role-playing or tabletop gaming a historical game, because there's so much lore behind it. It feels rich with the cultures, and you've got all the information there for all the different peoples and races and the legends and all that stuff. That's why I like Warhammer. I like 40k, because there is so much to it. I mean, behind me I've just got some of the Horus Heresy novels. You probably can't see them. No, you can't. They start from there and they go right across. That's not all of them. But if you're into Horus Heresy, which is 30k really, if those of you who don't know, it's Warhammer 30,000, set 10,000 years prior to Warhammer 40,000, obviously. But you've got so much lore there, and even playing 40k, you can draw from events from 10,000 years ago. You can, find and fight over artifacts, these fictitious artifacts, swords and different things. There's just so much. I can't, a separate video even wouldn't do it justice. A separate video series, maybe. There's just so much there. So, realism versus recreation. Now, I have played some games which were too realistic for my taste. It's like, no, this happens, if this blows up, that affects this, and if that goes off, and then that changes this, and this variable, and I feel like I don't enjoy games, and I've heard it said before, I don't enjoy games where you've got to work out the Pythagoras theorem just to do a simple thing. Just to shoot at this squad with this squad, I don't want to have to work out, the theory of relativity in order to do that. I don't find that enjoyable. But I want a certain amount, and it's just finding those games that tick the right boxes for you. So where do you lie on that? I lie somewhere in the middle. See, and it doesn't necessarily equate that if one is super realistic, it's super unenjoyable, or the other way round. Now, I also like War Machine and Hordes. Now, again, they're not realistic, but they're more regimented, I would say. If you're going to play a War Machine, more often than not, they will be more regimented than playing a game of Warhammer, a friendly game of Warhammer. Games of War Machine, in my experience, are not as friendly as games of Warhammer, because they're more akin to a game of chess. I don't know whether that's because it's more a skirmish game. I don't know. It could be. I don't know. I could think the same about playing Kill Team, which I haven't done. That could feel the same. I don't know. Historical stuff. Bolt action, for instance, Second World War. That's more of what they class as a skirmish type game, skirmish level game. But the likes of Kill Team, they are very small. They're a lot smaller again. So I don't know. And then board games. We come to the realm of board games. Now I like my board games. I like Space Hulk. I like Zombicide. I like Necromunda. That's more of a war game than a board game, but it's and that kind of thing. I like Aliens, the board game. Oh man, what a game! I like Resident Evil. Realism. Some board games can go too far again with realism, and I believe there are people that probably would enjoy more realistic games out there. But for myself, I prefer like a midway section, the ones that float my boat. I mean, the likes of Zombicide, it's not super realistic, is it? But it's enjoyable as a game, and it makes you. There's enough elements in it to remind you this is a game. Have fun, and that's it. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. What are your thoughts on it? Let me know down below, or better yet, do a video response. That would be awesome. Haven't had one of those in a long time. But yeah, but either way, just let me know what your thoughts are on the matter. I find the subject fascinating, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts on it. That's it for this week's Topical Tuesday. I'll see you on another Tuesday or another video. Until then, remember, all brushes lead to war. Bye for now.